So really exciting to have this webinar today and have the first industry event with Peter Gerard. My name is Tali. I'm the Doko manager. With Doko is our online distribution platform.
Actually, in this pandemic time, we all realized that we can't travel in the world and visit festivals and markets, and when everything is online and very communicative and easy to use, this is one of the best ways to watch new films and take them, buy them, and
have access.
Which
is not dependent on space and time and all the advantages. So Peter will actually tell us a lot about it. A little bit about Peter Gerard. He's a pioneer and expert in digital distribution technology and online marketing strategy. Elected between the top 100 influential and innovative people working across arts, culture, and the creative industries in the UK, 2013. Among his big projects, founder of digital distribution startup Distrify, general manager of entertainment at Vimeo. And the recent years,
he's co-founder of Welcome, the smart travel app, and he's developing an original film and series. So this is how we connect to you as well. You consult to select media and tech companies, and I heard you do know how to make ice cream, so maybe we'll have more questions about that at the end.
Yeah, always happy to be talking about ice cream.
So we're really excited to have you here and really happy to have everyone with us, and we can go ahead and start. Peter will take questions during the presentation, and there will be time for questions at the end.
Please use the chat box and not the wave hand, and that's it. Let's start.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for having me. This is going to be interesting to try and do a talk through a webinar. I like interaction, so please, I've got the chat window open. If anyone has any questions or anything's confusing or I'm going too fast, please post the chat and I'll try and answer your questions as we go. So today, I want to talk about distribution plans. So you decided to make a film, you've got a film that's made, you're thinking about your plan A and your plan B. Your plan A being the most likely plan for your distribution, and your plan B being what you do if that doesn't work out. So let's see. So of course, we're looking at a proliferation of digital buyers, and I'm going to focus on the digital space, as they mentioned, rather than talk about broadcasters and the other sales avenues. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu being the big three that have been around for a while, spending a lot of money on documentaries. But in the last sort of year and a half, there's really been the beginning of the streaming wars. So all of the major studios now have their very expensive content budgets that they're spending to launch these streaming services direct to consumer, as well as the tech players. So Disney, Universal, Warner, Apple. But the trend that I've been seeing is that there's a whole variety of other digital buyers out there. You have like new entrants spending a lot of money like Quibi, who are focused on 10-minute episodes, usually star-led. You have some ad-supported services like Pluto and Tubi that are actually doing very well. Smaller services like CuriosityStream that are focused more on science and education. Topic, which is from First Look Media, trying to kind of create an interesting, eclectic mix. All these different places are spending money and acquiring. So there's a lot of opportunities right now in the digital space. Some of the trends within the major buyers, though, Netflix has been moving more towards their originals and particularly series. So you'll see fewer one-offs than in the past, and fewer like licenses in the kind of what used to be that TV window range of 100,000-ish to acquire just one territory. Now they're looking for worldwide, Netflix original, ideally a series. Amazon, similar, mostly series and also mostly sports. So if you have sports related content, there's a place to go. They're still doing some non-original licenses, but fewer than before. And then Hulu, they still have more one-offs than the others, but tend to be a pop culture focus or something that's got awards contention, like where they're trying to win an Oscar. They used to do revenue share model, that's gone. And similar to Netflix, they're doing fewer of the sort of smaller licenses, focusing more on originals. So thinking about all that, we always see these numbers of how few films get distribution deals. This is from, I think, 2016. Every year, someone shares these stats. So that means that 99% of films, the ones who aren't getting a distribution deal, they need a plan A. And with that in mind, I consider all of these buyers to be plan B. These are less likely to happen than plan A. And this kind of plan A, plan B concept, I credit Brian Newman, who says, build your plan A, everything else is plan B. And so we're going to talk about Brian Newman's concept of plan A and how to build that. So the kind of main question when you're thinking about an alternative to an all rights deal or a distribution deal is how to break through the noise. We're talking about self-distribution or direct distribution, whatever you want to call it. You're building this opportunity to reach your audience and break through. So forgive me if some of you have seen me speak in the past. I mean, this is a concept I'm using for several years. This kind of 12-step program, really kind of lining up what you want to think about as you're making your film, all the way to releasing your film, so that you're thinking about that plan A of having an audience that you can market to and that you can successfully sell your film to. And just to preface, again, we're talking about people whose priority is to earn revenue back from their films. If you've got a different goal, like an impact goal or just a viewership goal, then a lot of these techniques can apply, but some things will be a little bit different, because a lot of what I'm focused on is how to generate not just an audience, but a paying audience. So people who are willing to pay to watch your film. So we'll just kind of zip through this 12 steps, and then we'll dive into each one by one. So the first thing to me is research. And as documentary makers, we're all very familiar with research when it comes to our subject matter and to the people we might want to interview and to where we might want to film, all the things that go into putting together your pitch, your proposal, and your film itself. And those same skills can apply to identifying your audience. And oftentimes, the research is the same. So let's take a quick case study. I love case studies because real examples are much better than just concepts. So we'll take an example from a few years back. A filmmaker named Griffin Hammond wanted to make a documentary about one of the most popular hot sauce brands in America called Sriracha. Now, Griffin, he had a little bit of a YouTube following. He made some short films, but doesn't have a large audience on his own, or at least didn't then. So he started doing his research, and he found the leading cookbook related to this hot sauce and decided to write to the author of the book to say, hey, one, I want you to be in my film, just like you would normally, but also I want you to help me get the word out about this film. So that's like finding a leader in the target community, much like finding an expert in the subject matter. And this guy ends up tweeting about the fact that the film is being made. He hasn't even started filming it yet. He's already getting exposure. He's already got his social media account set up so that when people see this tweet, they'll find him. And sure enough, this led to a chain of discovery starting from the newspaper in the town where Randy Clemens, this author, lives, leading into large food-related publication, Bon Appetit, and then Huffington Post, and ultimately Los Angeles Times, all writing about the fact that this film is being made. He hasn't even really started filming yet. So that led to him gathering an audience already on his Facebook pages, his Tumblr pages, Twitter. And Griffin is very good at making everything he does personal. So he's trying to not just grow fans for his film, but for his work and the relationship between him as a filmmaker and the films that he makes. And the concept here is that word of mouth gets press, gets word of mouth, gets press. It's a virtuous cycle. Journalists are always looking for something to write about. People are always looking for something to talk about or something to discover or to be ones to show off that they're the first to know about. And that cycle can continue and can lead to a lot of sharing. And as long as you're ready to capture that audience through your website, through your social media, you can take advantage of that virtuous cycle and build the beginnings of a fan base. Here's another case study example, a documentary about street photography from a few years back. Just some screenshots of their Tumblr and their Instagram and the website itself. And they created a sort of content brand around what they were making, started to grow followers, but most importantly, they grew a mailing list. And I'm sure it's not news to anyone that social media is pay to play. So you can put a lot of time and effort and money into growing a bunch of followers, but then you've got to spend more money to message those followers. Whereas if you get people to give you their email address, you can write to them for free. So always collect that valuable email address. And when you're using those email addresses, you want to follow some best practices with your mailing list. Make it personal. Like Griffin, he's always talking from the first person about the film that he's making, and he's being very honest and open about what he's doing. Short and sweet. Nobody likes to read a novel in their inbox. Consistent timing. One of the things that's important both on social media and on mailing lists is that you're writing to people on a consistent basis, whether it's once a month, once a week, every day, whatever's right for you and your audience, but as long as it's consistent so that people know to expect it, they look forward to it, and if it starts to come in a flurry, they might unsubscribe. Consistency is really important, and that also affects a lot of the social media algorithms, so the same applies to like Instagram or Facebook. And not too often. I would say emailing someone every day is a good way to get unsubscribed. So come up with the timing that works for your audience. And call to action. So whenever you're emailing someone, posting a social media post, whatever you're doing, you want to get some result out of that, whether that's asking the person to comment, give you feedback, answer a question, survey, ask them to share something. Give people something that they can do, and they'll feel more involved in your film. Now, it sounds hard to maintain that kind of level of communication, but we're all storytellers. We're all making films. We know how to tell a story. Let's just apply that in a slightly different medium, whether it's an email or a social media post. It's just our normal storytelling. And put that another way, whatever you're doing, wherever it is, you tell stories everywhere, all the time. And that's how you grow an audience that's interested in what you have to say. But don't repeat yourself. People don't want to hear the same story over and over again. They want to watch the same trailer over and over again. They want to see something new. They want to be surprised. They want to follow along the story over a long period of time. Right. So one of the things that we like to talk about these days is influencers. And I mentioned Brandy Clemens, the author of the Sriracha Cookbook, in the Griffin Hammond's example. Another film that was very successful with a self-distribution a few years ago. This was two films about marijuana legalization, The Union, and its follow-up film, The Culture High. Very cleverly interviewed famous people like Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, Richard Branson, Joe Rogan, kind of key people who are interested in the subject matter, are experts on the subject matter, but would also be willing to promote the film later. And influencers don't have to be celebrities or even people with 10,000 or 10 million people on their Instagram. Just as a counterexample of what I call micro-influencers. So a film that I made a couple of years ago, it's a short film about competing for bike share loyalty points here in New York. And when I put it online, I wasn't selling it. This is a free short, 10 minutes long, but I wanted to get people to watch it. And so I researched who are the micro-influencers, the people who have sway in the target community that I was trying to talk to, people interested in bike shares, the gig economy, urban transportation, any subject matter related to my film. So I did that research, I found those writers, and I started writing to them. City Bike, the company that runs the bike share here in New York, being an obvious one. Oliver O'Brien, who writes about bike shares, runs a bike share map website, has 7,000 followers. Harry Campbell, popular person writing about ride shares and Ubers, 8,000 followers. So small numbers, but enough to make an impact for a short film like mine. So City Bike ends up sending an email to all of their members promoting my film. These other folks posted about it either on Twitter or on their blogs, which led to more discovery. Even a journalist from Quartz finding it through that tweet. She wrote about it in her newsletter, and all that led to me getting 20,000 views of my short film on YouTube and Vimeo. So these are not like mega influencers, but they're the people who are willing to listen to me and say, oh, yeah, that is something that my audience would find interesting. So a very short case study on what I mean by influencer. I'm not talking about the Jenners or anything like that. So the key here, though, is to excite these folks about your film and your story, the story of you making that film, because that gives them something interesting to write about, and it allows them to make that personal connection with you. So we've years now, people talking about crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, but I'll just kind of quickly gloss over this with reference to my earlier example, the Sriracha film. So we talked about where Griffin managed to get in the press early on. And one of the key things he did here was to time that press with his Kickstarter campaign. So that one, he had 2,000 fans already before he launched his Kickstarter. And a lot of these publications were linking to the Kickstarter campaign. So he set a very modest goal, $5,000. He needed a lot more to make the film, obviously, but he knew that he wanted to have a good success story because just like the press, Kickstarter likes to celebrate success on their platform. So he was able to reach that goal on the first day, thanks to those 2,000 fans. And he was then featured on Kickstarter's homepage as Project of the Day. And that led to an eventual success of more than $20,000 raised, which was enough to make his short film, or got a meaningful amount of the way there. And then there's crowdsourcing, and this is involving your community in the actual making of your film. And I think this is really something that we forget about sometimes, but if you encourage your target audience to participate in the making, then they're more likely to promote it later. And so this film is sprinkled throughout with clips that are made by the Sriracha fan community, either that Griffin found on YouTube or that people submitted directly for the film. So what we're kind of talking about here is the fact that people like to hear stories, and whether that's your film when it's finished, or some story about the making of the film, or some story that's a little piece of the film or related to the film. And people love to share those stories, and you want to enable them to share your story, and to be the people who are passing on the fact that your film is being made or the fact that your film is available. You're enabling the storytelling community around your story. I see some comments here. I unfortunately can't read Hebrew, but if there's anything that I should know about, I hope someone will let me know. So now we've done all our prep, we've done our research, we know who our audience is, we started to gather the influencers together, and now we're making our film. And let's take that street photography example again. We're not just making the film, we're also making a whole ecosystem of content that is related to the film. And that ecosystem of content can actually be fairly easy to build. You have a lot of deleted sequences, you have extended interviews, anything that would have ended up on your cutting room floor, save it somewhere because you might need it later and it might be really useful for your promotion. And then, of course, don't forget about stills. There's so many films that get made and then there's no production stills of the filmmaking team, or there's no great high quality stills from the people who are in it or the scenes that are in it. Those can be really valuable in your social media and your press later on. So we've made the film, we've got our assets, and now we're going to build out our plan A. This is the kind of crux of my kind of methodology here. And let's start by thinking about what people are willing to pay for. And of course, like I said earlier, if your goal is not to get people to pay for your film, like my short about the city bike, you know, things are going to be a little different. But assuming you're wanting people to pay for your film, people are more willing to pay for something that is more related to content they're interested in or a topic they're interested in, and especially if it's specifically tailored. And I think this is something that can sometimes get lost. Like, you don't want to try and have too many different target audiences, because then your audience is kind of fractured and they don't feel like the film is specifically for them. So like a film about a popular band is going to be more successful than a film about 20 popular bands, because those people who are mega fans of that popular band are going to be less interested in the film about 20 bands. And I've seen that firsthand play out. A few other stats to kind of reinforce this idea. You know, especially this is from some surveys of millennials from a couple of years ago. You know, people are interested in content that's useful, tailored to their interests. They want to feel like it's not too salesy, and they want it to be thought-provoking and intelligent. So that's a boon for documentaries. We tend to make thought-provoking and intelligent work. So, you know, for years now, people have been talking about day and date releases, breaking the windows and releasing on all platforms at once. And I actually don't think that's always the best move. I mean, obviously now with the Trolls movie going straight to digital because of coronavirus, things are looking a little weird, but you know, this is a special weird time. And, you know, generally there's a strategy that I like to promote, which is using smart windowing to maximize revenue per viewer. And you want to think about your release strategy from the point of view that at the beginning of your release, you have your core audience who are the people who are most willing to pay. And if you put your film straight onto a SVOD or an ad-supported service, those people are going to watch it, but you're not going to make very much money from them because you get a very small amount per view. But if you make your film available on a theatrical tour, at festivals, or through direct distribution or on iTunes, then those core audience members are willing to pay for it. And that's when you're going to make a higher amount of revenue. And then as your distribution time goes on, you can expand to these wider audiences of casual viewers who are more interested in just taking a chance and watching something that they stumble across on whatever Netflix or Amazon Prime, whatever service they have. And just to reinforce that idea, earn more by selling direct to your biggest fans first. And this is another kind of view of how that works out in terms of a timeline. I'm assuming I'll be able to share all these slides with everyone by email later on, so feel free to ask about that. But it's sort of laying out that first line is what we were talking about around building your audience, which really starts from the moment you have the idea for your film, and then leading into your festival screenings, your digital pre-order. Pre-order is a great way to generate early demand and create a lot of excitement on launch day. And then, of course, your direct distribution of downloads and rentals and DVDs and Blu-rays, believe it or not, some people still buy them. And then, of course, other VOD down through TV, airline, SVOD, AVOD. And just, again, another look at the same kind of concept, but looking at that kind of profit per viewer. I won't read all this out, but one thing I'd like to point out, given the audience here, you know, a lot of films that are in for the Jewish market can actually do very well on a festival tour. And of course, right now with festivals going online, things are going to be a little different, but I'm confident and hopeful that, you know, in a few months or next year, the festival circuit will be more back to normal. And you can earn screening fees, and the Jewish Film Festival circuit is known for paying reasonable screening fees for festival screenings. And really, if you do it right, you can get a screening fee from pretty much any festival that wants to show your film. And that's actually a very good early revenue. And then you can at the same time be doing educational sales where you're charging a few $100s a license. And that particularly works well in North America, where universities and libraries are willing to invest in having films in their educational library. And then, of course, once people are having events again, speaking fees are really beneficial for those event theatrical and festival screenings, and also educational, of course. So these are those same release platforms with kind of their economics written out. And then when we talk about direct distribution, right now the market is fairly consolidated. There are three main platforms that allow you to sell direct. The two that I think are the most useful for filmmaker entrepreneurs like us are probably Gumroad and Vimeo OTT. Gumroad giving you the best possible deal. You're earning the far more of that ticket price that you're selling, and it supports conversion tracking for ad marketing. And the only thing that I think is really a blocker for Gumroad is if you have sold a few regions of your film and you need to geo-block. But if you're doing a worldwide release, it's a great platform. Vimeo OTT is different than Vimeo On Demand, and the main advantages it gives are allowing you to collect those precious emails and to track your conversions if you're doing any ad marketing. And just one other comment, starting with pre-order at a higher price point is a great way to collect that early revenue. And I also recommend delaying your rental until at least a few weeks or a month or two after your original launch. You know, rentals are a lot cheaper and they reduce your revenue per viewer. There are so many digital platforms out there right now. The kind of main things to be aware of, Quiver, which is part of Premiere Digital, is probably one of the easiest ways to get your film onto iTunes without a distributor. It does cost over $1,000, but if you really want to be on iTunes, that's the way to do it. Amazon Video Direct is a very easy way to put your film onto Amazon in a number of their territories. You get to set your price, you get to set when it's available for purchase as opposed to subscription. Revenue share is not great, but you know, there's a lot of people on Amazon. And then I also recommend this platform, Film Hub, which allows you to basically put your rights available to a whole bunch of platforms that they have deals with. And their revenue share is fairly reasonable. Okay, so we've got our plan now, and we're going to build up to launch. And this is when we take all that extra content we made, all those clips we pulled off the cutting room floor, and we give them to publishers who might want to write about our film. We give them to our social media followers. You know, we use them for lots of different things. And the more you have, the better. And these are all examples from that film, Everybody's Street, about street photography. Make sure you save some of your extras to include as bonus features for purchasers. And just remember that even journalists and bloggers, they need stories. And if you can give them a ready-made video, then let's, you know, have it ready for them. I've got a question here. So the VOD world is very new and unknown to Israeli filmmakers. Can we talk a little bit about this different approach to distribution? Yeah, so I mean, it's generally what I'm trying to do, but you know, what we're looking at here is really, like I said at the very beginning, you know, acknowledging that the likelihood of a all rights distribution deal is fairly low, like 1%. So having this plan for how to do your own distribution. And these are like all the things you're doing to build up to it. We haven't executed our self-distribution plan yet. We've just planned it out. We're building up an audience. We're seeding out our content to our community and to potentially new communities to grow that audience even more. And we're trying to get people telling stories about our film. And I think this applies whether you make an all rights deal to Netflix or sell to a broadcaster or anything. Having people telling stories about you and your film is definitely the most beneficial thing to do. Another example of what you can do with your extra materials, the content that you cut out of your film. This is a very recent example, film called Dodging Bullets. They were in the middle of a screening tour that ultimately got canceled because of the coronavirus and the kind of closure of cinemas. So in order to keep the energy going around their film, they made a short clip from some material from the film and some material that didn't make it in the film, and they posted it online and allowed people to give their email address over to get free access to that clip. And in the last few weeks, they got 10,000 new email addresses of potential viewers. So all those people got to watch that clip, got interested in the film, and this doesn't impact their distribution at all. It actually helps it. So again, I was talking about this earlier, posting content. You want to do it consistently, especially towards the lead up of your film. Here are some screenshots of some of the social media that led up to the release of that documentary, The Culture High. And you can kind of see that the rate of posting got a little bit more intense towards the launch, and that makes sense. You're trying to create some excitement around it. But most importantly, everything they post is different. Don't repeat yourself. And the other thing is that you want your content to be easy to share and remix. So if you make some cool memes like this, maybe you should also make your assets available to people who want to make their own memes about your film. It's a really powerful way to get some excitement. Okay, now we're at the release stage. And we'll talk a little bit more about the VOD world. But the first thing to bear in mind is that you have your plan A. So you're ready to go. You're launching at whatever festival. You've got all of the self-distribution lined up. You've got your audience excited about your film. And you could still get an offer. You're still trying to get that plan B. So maybe you get an offer from a major broadcaster, a streamer, a distributor, and you can then look at that offer and say, okay, this is pretty good, but you're comparing it to your plan A. So your offer from the distributor is your plan B. Your plan that you've been working on ever since you started your film is your plan A. And if that plan B offer doesn't look that promising, you don't have to take it. You don't have to be taking a distribution deal that you don't think is going to work because you've got something that you've already built. So like I said, we'll get back into VOD in a minute, but let's just talk a little bit more about what a release looks like. I know it's weird to say this when we're all trapped inside, but maybe it's even more true now that people really like to go out and they like to experience things. And I think one of the things that is really important, no matter what your release strategy is to create experiences for people to share in the real world around your film. And I love the creativity that's going on right now where people are coming up with ways to do live streaming and kind of Zoom events and things like that. But let's try and make those interesting. A Q&A is fine, but making a more unique experience is definitely more memorable. From one of my older short films to one of my most successful events, I had a musician from the film and one of the writers perform both poetry and music, and we showed the film, and a ton of people came out. It was a really great event. And those kinds of things can be toured. It's much like how the music world is having to do more touring to keep things going. Again, this is a weird time to talk about all this, but I still think this is where we're going to be again in a few months. And like events don't just have to be those unique experiences. They can also be moments of celebration. And it's important to think about every moment in your film's making and release as an event that you can celebrate. Oh, I just got to picture lock. Show some clips to people, share it. You've just landed a great composer. Celebrate some of their music. Give your community something to know about your film and those events. And the same goes with any part of your release. So you've launched it on iTunes. That's a huge event. Let people know. You've now enabled rentals, another event. All these things can be celebrated and turned into things that people are excited to be part of. And the most important thing about your release is making it something people don't want to miss. So if you've got that community, that audience you built up, that mailing list, you want them to really feel like they want to be part of everything that you're doing. That FOMO power is really powerful. So don't forget merchandise. I know that we're talking about digital distribution. We just talked about doing theatrical and events, but oftentimes we have these events or we're at a festival screening. We have a lot of people who really enjoyed our film and we missed the opportunity to actually earn something out of that. And so some filmmakers are really smart about having merchandise available. These are some examples from a documentary called Film About Coffee. And they were really clever about having merchandise from the get-go. So they created these beautiful little books using the stills and frames from their film and their production notes, and just made these nice collectibles that they could sell to people who probably didn't want to buy a DVD. They also sold these digital download cards. So say you turn up at a screening or you're at a coffee shop and you hear about this film, sell someone a digital download card right there and then. That way they've got gifts as well. When people aren't sending DVDs as gifts, these things did the trick. And we'll take a quick break. We'll see if this works. I'll show a 1-minute trailer of this film. I think it's quite
The ideal of specialty coffee is transparency. The facts of the coffee, knowing where it comes from.
Truly good coffees are harder to get. How does something that's so exotic all of a sudden become kind of a mainstay of our culture? We're a coffee drinking culture.
It's no longer a cup of joe. It's now an adventure. In search of the ultimate cup.
All right, so you can see this film has a very clear aesthetic that is geared toward their target audience of coffee lovers. And all the merchandise they created was very much along that same aesthetic. Really, really smart way to earn some extra revenue around the film. So they made these tote bags, these kind of coffee towels, all in that same aesthetic that the audience and the film really celebrate. So our film's available, and now we want to engage those influencers that we gathered earlier on. And let's look back at the Culture High, which I mentioned earlier. They had interviewed Richard Branson for the film, and they got Richard Branson to premiere the trailer on the Virgin website, which was a huge lift for people being aware of the film. Joe Rogan also interviewed in the film. He ended up talking about it on his podcast multiple times. Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, Be Real, a lot of these other folks that they interviewed also posted about it on their social media pages. You know, if you've interviewed someone who has any following, they're going to want to let people know that, hey, I'm in this cool new film and it's available. And you can, if you're doing your own distribution and you can see the sales metrics, you can see the impacts of those kinds of promotions in real time. And you can follow that along as you go. And being aware of what you're doing to promote the film, what others are doing to promote the film, and how they affect your sales is, you know, one of the really valuable parts about, you know, executing a plan A. So again, earlier I mentioned, you know, I don't see influencers as just those famous people. In the film about coffee, for them, influencers were local coffee roasting companies. Like, you probably haven't heard of either of these companies, but they brought out, you know, a lot of people to these screenings. Screenings, by the way, which were making the filmmakers money because they charge a screening fee. But that turned into a lot of people posting on social media about the excitement of seeing this film in a space. I see a question. Most of your examples are on essay films or topic-driven film. What about character-driven films? That's a really great question. Let's come back to that in a few minutes. We're near the end of the 12 steps, and then we'll talk about that. And this particular film, they did hundreds of screenings at coffee shops and related places around the world. That ended up being six-figure revenue for the filmmakers and was more than half of their total revenue. So if you have a film that has a topic, that has a built-in network of communities that you can reach, doing screenings can be a really, really valuable thing. And we talked about word of mouth earlier. I just want to kind of reinforce why word of mouth is so important. Less than half of people are willing to take a chance on something that they haven't heard about. You know, they're not willing to fork over their time or their money to watch something that's, you know, no one's ever said anything about. And, you know, based on some research that I did when I was at Vimeo, we found that people find recommendations from friends and family to be far and away the most important thing that drives their decisions in terms of what to purchase. So let's again look back at our word of mouth and press virtuous cycle with the documentary about hot sauce. When Griffin released the film, it was, you know, several months after he had his early press, he wrote to every journalist that had ever written about him. And this is something that I think is really important to do this throughout your career, is to maintain your own Rolodex of people who've ever written about you or your films. And whenever you're doing something that's press-worthy, you can contact those people directly. It's a lot cheaper than a publicist, and it's a lot more personal than a press release. And every email that Griffin wrote was very personal. You would say, oh, I really liked how you commented on this or that, and say, hey, you might like the film. And he gave them a promo code so they could watch it and review it. Ultimately, a few of them did, leading to NPR, which is the national public radio in the US, doing a big story about the film when it came out. And that ended up becoming the most shared story on Facebook, which again started another virtuous cycle. After a little while, the excitement went down a little bit. Griffin wanted to kick it back into gear, so he created a bunch of GIFs. And then he found a journalist who was interested in the GIFs. So he got them published in Business Insider, which led to another virtuous cycle where people shared those GIFs to Imgur. Then they became viral on Reddit. And then he was getting written about in lots of online food publications. Internet loves GIFs. If you can create cool GIFs or memes, especially ones that people can remix, it's a really nice way to get that kind of content engine going. And I mentioned discount codes, I think, but when you've got influencers or partners who are in the film or interested in the film, one of the best things you can do is give them personal discounts that they can give to their audience, because everyone's looking for something valuable to give to their audience, whether you're an influencer, whether you're a business, or just anybody. So you can create unique discount codes on pretty much any self-distribution platform, and those are really powerful ways to incentivize purchase. So now we're at the end of our kind of program, but really our program never ends, because as long as you want people to watch your film, you've got to keep engaging people. You know, like this Everybody Street, the street photography film, you know, they still have a hostess screening link on their website. They've done some really interesting PR around the fashion and the photography in their film with Vogue magazine. And they keep posting to their Instagram account almost daily. And that's a great way to keep people interested in the film and aware of the film years after it was made. So we're going to go into a couple case studies, which I think will highlight, one, the first question about the mechanics of VOD, and two, kind of get into that question around essay/topic films versus character-driven. So should be clear by now, my philosophy is to maximize profit per viewer. And let's look at the details of how a couple of films really made that work. So I mentioned this hot sauce film, Sriracha, a couple times. We'll watch a little bit of the trailer.
It's kind of funny because, I mean, when it comes down to it, it's hot sauce, right? But I've become pretty obsessed with it.
It's absolutely iconic, and I think it's completely unintentional, too.
3 very distinct syllables.
Sriracha.
I just love that bold flavor.
Oh. It's yummy.
Almost everyone loves my product.
It has this cult following.
I feel very proud.
Thank you for making the world's greatest sauce.
All right, so this is very much a topic-driven film, and there's a fan community that already existed for it. And one of the great things about this example, and the reason I use it, is because Griffin has shared down to the penny every bit of his revenue and every bit of his distribution. You can find his article on Medium where he has all this information. Highly recommend checking it out. This was released a few years ago, so you'll see that some of the platforms have changed their approach and their revenue models. Like for example here, when he released his film, he was able to earn 10 cents per view on Amazon Prime. Now that's much more like 1 cent per view. So things are changing. Hulu doesn't do this ad share anymore. It's much harder to do YouTube ad revenue. So things are definitely changing, but I think overall his film is very much worth looking at from a case study perspective. So let's look at some of those actual numbers. These are the different platforms that he released on in roughly the order of his release. And you can see in the green bar how much money he made from each of those platforms, and the blue bar how many people that those reached. And let's just rearrange that a little bit and look at it by profit per viewer. And you can see here that on the earlier parts of his release that were more direct and higher value, he reached many fewer customers, but he made a lot more money from those. When we go back here, the majority of his money is made from the left half of the chart. When he went on to Hulu and YouTube and Amazon Prime, he reached, nearly 1 million people, but that only added up to less than half of the revenue he was making elsewhere. And if he was releasing that today, his Amazon Prime number would be 1/10 of that. So really demonstrates how this model works out. And like I said, he has all of this on his Medium post. He updates it every couple of years with all the latest numbers. And you can really see that breakdown down to the penny. One other film, this is very much, again, a topic-driven film.
Imagine a life with less stuff, less clutter, less stress, debt, discontent. A life with fewer distractions.
That film, Minimalism, a documentary about a particular lifestyle that these guys are promoting. They spent a few years building their audience through their books, their book tours, their blog, their podcast, and then made a film about the subject of their books by filming their book tour. They premiered that in 2015 at festivals, probably made something off of that. And then they did a screening tour of 14 cities in the middle of 2016, followed by a pre-order that was being promoted at every single one of those screening events at a pretty high value, $20. Again, like I said earlier, your core audience is excited to see your film. They're willing to pay more for it. Also, having a higher price allows you to offer bigger discounts. Like when I mentioned earlier, discount codes. If you offer 50% off of $20, it's a lot of value compared to 50% off of a $3 rental. They then did a much larger theatrical, reached 400 theaters. And then at the same time as that was going on, they started offering the bonus features as a separate purchase from the film. They realized that some people will watch the film on their theatrical tour and they don't want to buy it for $20, but they're willing to pay $10 for their bonus features. Really clever way to go about it. Then they released the deluxe edition, the one that people have been pre-ordering, and that came out in August. A month and a half later, they released a $25 DVD on Amazon. Like another 2 weeks after that, then they finally went to the bigger VOD platforms, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, at their kind of standard pricing, where you're not as able to charge as much and where you lose a bigger chunk of the revenue. And all of that excitement that they were able to get and all the numbers they were able to show probably helped them secure their Netflix sale. And it was released in December on Netflix. So they had a good 7 or 8 months of earning revenue from their core before they reached that wide Netflix audience in the US. And then 6 months later, the rest of the world. So I don't have their sales figures, or I can't share their sales figures, but you know, this model follows that same strategy of focusing on your core audience at a high value down to a wide audience at a smaller amount per viewer. So before we talk about the questions that come up, just want to sort of highlight a new case study I discovered in the last few days. A filmmaker named Jeff McIntyre, he made a documentary about famous Amos cookies. I don't know if they're famous outside of the US, but he followed pretty much this model that I'm promoting and found it really was hard to make it work. And you know, things are definitely changing in the last few years, especially with the proliferation of streaming services. And he's trying to share all of his mistakes so that people can learn from them. I recommend checking out his video on YouTube. This film, The Great Cookie Comeback. And let's talk a little bit about, you know, subject-driven versus character-driven. So a lot of this concept is kind of based on this idea that if you can build fans that are interested in you and your work, then you can earn a livable salary. And this is kind of promoted by Kevin Kelly, the editor of Wired, more than 10 years ago, this concept. And so when you're making character-driven films that don't have an obvious community that you can reach in the way that we were talking about here, like through a subject, then really what you're trying to do is build an audience around you as a filmmaker. You're building a brand, a personality, you know, and that might take longer. It might take more content, but it's definitely possible. It's definitely easier if your films are more consistent in style and approach. But if you can build up 1,000 people on your list who are willing to purchase everything you make, up to $100 a year. So if you're making a documentary over several years, maybe you need a larger number of fans to make this model work. But really what you're doing then is thinking about this whole strategy, but thinking about it from the point of view as, I'm a filmmaker, I tell great stories, and people want to read my stories or view my stories. And that's how you can make it work for character-driven. The other thing to consider is maybe a character-driven film has a particular angle that might resonate with people. I peeked into the DocuShoot, looked at some of the films that are in the market. I saw one that I was excited about one of the most prolific sperm donors in the world. Film like that, it's very much character-driven, but if you can kind of figure out what makes him interesting and the sort of world that he inhabits and people interested in fertility and the different target audiences that might make sense for a character like that. So it's a way to sort of make this model work. So it's definitely a challenge. And I think this latest case study from Jeff McIntyre shows that even if you have a film that's very much about a subject, a famous person, who makes cookies that are available in every store in America, it's still challenging to gather folks together and create that excitement that makes them want to purchase the film. So, but it can be done. I've got all these other case studies to prove it, and there's tons more, which I don't have access to because not everyone shares the numbers, but that's my kind of answer to that question. Someone's saying, can we please see the sales figures table you showed before? Yeah, I'm happy to share all the slides, so I'll make sure those get sent out. Do we have other questions?
Yes, hello, I have a question. My name is Noah Kasharel. I was wondering, we all speak Hebrew here. Is it a barrier? It's like even in digital distribution, at least the examples that you've shown so far, they're all in English. What about foreign language films? What are our chances?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm always looking for strong case studies in other languages. And I would look at the success of, when you're talking about Hebrew specifically, I would look at the success of some of the fiction work that's been released in the last few years. There's the series Shtisel, which was, a huge international success. And I know Hedva's she was with us here somewhere. She was one of the early distributors of that. Very popular on Netflix. There was another series on Netflix recently. I don't think it was in Hebrew, I think it was in Yiddish, but about that had a star from Shtisel, so that's why I mentioned it, called Unorthodox. That reached the top 10 on Netflix in the US, so like English speakers were keen to watch it, even though it's almost entirely in a foreign language. I think that these stories can break through. You just have to capture the fact that people will want to hear the story or are interested in the characters, and there's lots of different ways to gauge that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like the American market is quite closed for people from outside the US, especially for small docs. Any tips regarding the way to get into the market? I'm not sure what small docs means particularly. I think that the American market is definitely challenging from outside. There's a reluctance amongst some of the broadcasters around subtitles. That goes back to the foreign language question. But I do see that changing. The number of successful subtitled releases on some of the major streamers is encouraging. It shows if you're willing to watch, 40 episodes of Money Heist, which is in Spanish. And these things are definitely becoming more accessible. But when it comes to kind of self-distribution like this, you know, it's understanding who your audience is wherever they are. And if you find that your audience primarily speaks Spanish, then you're gonna have to find a way to communicate to them in Spanish through social media. And that's, you know, one of the sort of kind of blessings and challenges of a very interconnected world. You know, you can very easily cross borders with distribution, but that can also be more difficult in terms of communication. Anyone else have questions? Did I overwhelm you with too many numbers and charts and graphs? Is that? I will say this has been fun, but it's definitely unusual to give a talk where you can't hear any response in the room. So. All right. See, Noah says, should be very happy to receive the presentation. Yeah, I'll be happy to share it. And I'll include links to some of the original case studies to go into more detail for any of the things that I mentioned. Question, are things changing more now because of the corona? People watching more content online. I'd say, yeah, definitely people are watching more content online, and that the corona situation is, I think, creating new opportunities for people to do interesting kind of creative things and creative digital events. And I think that's, to me, that there's definitely, coronavirus is a very sad and depressing thing, but I think it's exciting to see people kind of push their idea. And the example I gave around the filmmaker who shared clips from their film for an email address was really smart. I think the people doing kind of live stream events has been really interesting, where you can do a virtual screening and then have a live Q&A on Instagram or on Facebook or any other live platform. Those kinds of things are smart, because if you want to participate in a live Q&A, then you need to pay and watch the film ahead of time. So you can offer your film for a short-term kind of event rental, and then have that live event that people tune in for. And that's been successful for a number of people. So next question here, in terms of finance, where would you look for funds if you plan to sell the film only after it was done? That's a great question. I mean, I mentioned crowdfunding. I don't think crowdfunding is the be all and end all. I think that a lot of filmmakers who are taking these approaches are, you know, raising money from, you know, investors and friends and family. The example of the famous Amos film that I gave at the very end, I think it was very low budget, like $15,000, and the filmmaker didn't pay themselves. They're still trying to recoup that, but I know other filmmakers who've been successful at raising money from investors who either want to have their name on a film or, maybe believe that there's some money to be made at the end. So that's definitely possible. Do you know much of the marketing budgets or for some of the case studies? So that's a great question. Like that last Famous Amos one, he shares his marketing budget. And a lot of the case studies I use, like the Sriracha film, he had a $0 marketing budget, didn't spend anything on advertising or PR, did that all himself. On the Everybody Street example, the street photography one, that film had a PR advertising agency as a partner, so they were able to do their PR. I don't think they did any advertising. The Culture High, that one was a film that when I was at Vimeo, we invested in some marketing for it, and we could do a whole nother hour-long conversation about marketing and Facebook ads. I usually don't like to talk about it because it's a very easy way to lose a lot of money. If you don't really know what you're doing and you don't have the tools to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing, marketing dollars can just disappear into smoke or really into the pockets of Facebook and Google. So, my philosophy is that if you are going to spend any money on marketing, it should be to amplify the work that you've done in terms of bringing an audience together and amplify the message to those people, rather than to try and find new people, because it's very hard to find new people through ads who are willing to pay. But if you are going to do any marketing, I highly recommend either Gumroad or Vimeo OTT, because you can put a tracking pixel on those, and then when you do ads, you can optimize for conversions or for purchases. But if you're doing ads to send people to Amazon, you're just throwing your money away. That's my point of view. Okay. We maybe over time, I forget how long we have for this session, but I think Talia said something, but she's on mute.
Yes. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I mostly work with Israeli filmmakers, but they tend to be more traditional. They are more interested in festivals, TV, etc. So far, it's been quite challenging for me to convince them to do the digital distribution. So thank you for this whole presentation. Because to me, it's not the future, it's the present already. So I just only hope that more and more filmmakers will apply it, even Israeli filmmakers, to succeed, because the old windows are changing. It's getting much more difficult to reach audiences in the old ways. So we have to explore the new ones.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I actually think that not only that, but even this kind of self-distribution model is getting harder. And that's because of to me, it seems like it's because of the shifting behaviors and the power of these mega streaming services that have so much high quality content available. It's becoming harder and harder to generate much interest outside of those. So, I think that a lot of what I talked about here definitely applies and can work. But, I'm hoping for a future where, filmmakers can collaborate, maybe share audiences. Something I didn't mention is that if you're making a film that maybe will appeal to the same audience that liked another filmmaker's film, maybe you can work something out where you can co-promote each other's films to your audiences. There's filmmaking is a collaborative medium, and the more we can collaborate in our distribution, the more we can compete against these major players that are buying fewer films but owning more of people's attention.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Really fascinating. I said a lot of stuff before, but no one heard, so it's okay.
Okay.
I think that I want to say a few words about Dokashuk as a new platform. The platform is 1 year old. About this time of year, we launched it last year. It's a digital distribution platform for Israeli documentaries. We have almost 200 films from the last 3 years, all the documentaries that were made in Israel in the last 3 years, and as a part of corporate branch, we have the same audiences of buyers that come to the corporate market, and this is the path for the finished films to be distributed. As a digital distribution platform, I'm not sure that at the beginning we really knew a year ago what we were getting into, and the market is really changing. And us as a platform are doing this job for you. I mean, of course, it's really great and go for it with the independent, but also we are how do you say, scouting for VOD markets, for the Israeli market and the filmmakers to collaborate with them. And we're really finding out new options that, as Noah said, is really this whole VOD as opposed to TV channels and festivals is very new here and exciting. I just wanted to say that. So everybody's welcome to check out dokashuk.co.il. We have all the corporate projects on there in development, rough cuts, and close encounters, and of course the Dokashuk, which is the finished films. And we will send also the presentation, the very good presentation Peter made for us, and more details. Tonight, we have decided last minute to have a party, an actual party, not an online party. We'll all be gathering at Ben of Vigdor 20. It's a pop-up. We'll have DJ, VJ, drinks, filmmakers, and we're really happy to have this opportunity after working from home and under the circumstances for the last 2 months. And Peter, I personally have one question. Because we're short in time, because I think we can talk about many things, and all your experiences is fascinating. It's just that it sounds like a really full-time job, the marketing strategies, which is exciting and adventurous. And so my question is, do you recommend it for filmmakers, for independent filmmakers, to take it on themselves, or to... Is this something that as Vimeo, you had these strategies, which is more of a corporate form? How do you see it?
I think it's very true that, you know, the release and the marketing of a film is a full-time job. And the examples I gave were of filmmakers who really took on that full-time approach because they wanted to get an audience for their films. You know, there were a couple of them where when I was at Vimeo, we had a little bit of help to kind of push some things along, but I didn't really want to focus on those too much because, you know, like one, Vimeo doesn't do that anymore, and two, it's hard for, you know, someone to find that kind of support. There are people who have managed to raise enough money for their film that they can afford to hire someone who can help with a lot of this stuff. And there are consultants out there who are, you know, happy to work on someone's film and help with the marketing and promotion. But, you know, if you know what your expectations are and can moderate your expectations based on how much you're willing to put in terms of time and effort, then that's a, you know, really helpful way to kind of manage that. So like when I made my short about the bike share, I knew I was releasing it for free, so my expectations were, you know, fairly low, but I wanted to get enough of a viewing that I felt like it had reached some people. So I put in probably, I don't know, several days of research to find the people that I wrote to about it, to get those people to tweet about it and write about it. And for me, that was enough for that film. But if I had been working 3 years on a feature, I would probably put another year into working full time on it in the release. And I know that, you know, traditionally people like to sort of deliver their cut and go to their premiere and then start shooting the next film. But that's not, for most people, that's not going to be a sustainable career, because if no one's talking about their film and no one's promoting that film, then nobody's watching it. And, you know, I know other filmmakers who their expectations are, look, I've made a bunch of films. I want to put them online, make them available so that if anybody's interested, they can watch them. And if I only make a few dollars a month, I'm okay with that. And if you're okay with that and you're in a position where that's okay, that's great. But if you want to, you know, make it work and you haven't got your plan B sale to a major buyer, then it is a full-time job. And I think that's something to consider when you start making your film, and to kind of factor into your expectations right from the get-go.